Hey everyone, how's it going? Elliot here, and welcome to the Retro Future. Today I'm going to be doing a restoration to an original Nintendo DS. This one was bought from Japan, and as you can see, it's in really terrible condition. It was sold as faulty, so let's see if we can get this thing working and give it a good clean up, paint it up so it looks brand new, and give it another life. We'll start by checking why it doesn't work. Oh, a battery might help. There we go. All it needed was a battery. So now we can begin with the teardown. Now I didn't pay a lot for this thing. I think it was under $10. Now although this DS is in terrible condition, it's only really sort of age-related wear from someone who's just used their Nintendo DS passionately every single day. Let's go ahead and remove all of the tri-wing screws. This electric screwdriver will be linked in the description below. You can see there the build-up of just lots of different things. Let's not think about it. Once we remove the back, we can then have a look at the inside. Now the back is in really terrible condition. The inside, however, although slightly dusty, is in really great condition. You can see on the left there, the water indicator hasn't tripped. Lots more build-up of nasty stuff that we don't want to think about. But to be honest, this thing's coming up to 20 years old now, so you can kind of expect that. After removing all of the small Phillips screws, we're going to go ahead and undo the ribbon cables. We need to be really careful when using tweezers around these ribbon cables because one sort of slip could damage them permanently. I'm using ceramic tipped tweezers. Again, I'll link those in the description too. They're really great for picking things up without risk of damage. Once we've unplugged all of those, we need to remove the antenna wire, and then we're pretty much free to lift the motherboard out. After doing that, we can flip it over and take a look at the underside, which looks equally nice. Now let's go ahead and remove all of the rest of the things inside this shell. The buttons are obviously a focus point of wear and also dirt. And yeah, it's really nasty. I genuinely left this in a bucket of hot soapy water for a day before starting to clean it up. Now we need to remove this ribbon cable, which is held underneath a small piece of foam on the bottom screen. So before we lift out that screen, we need to remove this ribbon cable very gently. After we've done that, we can lift out the bottom screen, which is really badly damaged. Again, just from sort of genuine use, it's not being damaged by mistreatment. It's just a stylus rubbing around on a screen for many years. Now the screw covers have gone a horribly gloopy sort of mess. One thing I found quite interesting about this is where the paint had worn off, the plastic underneath had actually gone yellow, which is kind of similar to, you know, when Game Boys and all that old tech goes yellow, but it's just bizarre seeing the plastic only in that area underneath the worn paint go yellow. And you'll see what I mean in a bit more. Now we need to pry apart this top piece of the shell. You need to be really delicate when doing this. This plastic is not as strong as it was when it was first made. One slight bit of pressure in the wrong area will send a split down that plastic, so you need to be super careful. You can see that Apple sticker in the middle. Now this is going to be a really interesting thing to keep an eye out for. That sticker will basically stop the plastic from going yellow. And you'll see what I mean when we start sanding it down, but I don't really understand the science of it. It's certainly very interesting though. Now we can remove the ribbon cable and the antenna and go ahead and set this whole top assembly off to the side and then gently remove the speakers. Obviously, we want every single component out of this DS before we start putting it in any water and spray painting. So we're going to remove the old screen lens, which was really scratched up, and take out the hinges. You need to make sure you do this when the hinge is open fully. And there we have it, everything laid out on the table. I'm super excited to start working on this thing and putting it back together. Now, we need to sand down the plastic. It's really important that we do that before painting it, otherwise all of the small scratches will show up underneath the layer of new paint. So we need to give it a nice, flat, smooth surface to paint onto. Now you can see what I meant there by the yellowing on the plastic which has been exposed by scratches. There's 4 pieces to paint, don't forget that little hinge cover. And we're going to be rubbing everything down first with some very fine grit, wet and dry sandpaper. Now it really didn't take a lot to remove the paint. Obviously this thing must have just been rubbed around in someone's hands for a really long time because the paint almost fell off with a very small amount of pressure. And you can see there what I mean about that apple symbol. It stayed there until I painted it. So whatever was going on with that, it stopped the plastic from yellowing underneath. Some parts of the plastic were grey and other parts were yellow. So it was quite hard to see where I had actually removed the old paint and we were down to the plastic underneath. But generally speaking, you don't need to necessarily remove all of the paint, just need to make sure that everything is nice and smooth. Now after I'd finished sanding everything down with a wet and dry, I gave it a really good thorough clean in the sink with some hot soapy water, and then we were ready to paint. Now we're going to be priming this first. I'm not a painting expert and I don't have a very sterile, dust-free environment to paint in. I just went outside and had a go at the best I could possibly do. From my knowledge and experience, 30 centimeters away, very small, light bursts. Don't do anything too thick because you're going to be applying more layers. So starting really thick is just pointless. And start spraying before the can is over the subject. That way, you're not going to get any sort of pools of paint from where you've pressed down the nozzle. I hope that makes sense. Don't forget the little hinge cover. Then one more layer of primer. This was about half an hour later after the first one. And then we're going to have a really nice surface to work with. Again, you can see there just how lightly I'm spraying this on. And although it looks really close, it's about 30 centimeters away. And that's the final result of the primer. After 2, I think possibly 3 coats of it. Now we're going to move on to the silver spray paint. And there we have it. A day later, the final article looks fantastic. There are very fine specks underneath some of the paint where dust had fallen from outside, but you can't expect it to be perfect. You can see the crack underneath there. That wasn't actually structural, it's just surface, little split, but just wanted to show you that so that you know it's still the same DS. Now we're going to give everything one final clean with some isopropyl alcohol before putting it back in. There's no point putting dirty components into a brand spanking new shell. I'll rub down the little metal feet as well to make sure that they make a really nice contact, drop in the screen and screw down the small little PCBs either side. Don't forget that little spacer as well. For some reason, Nintendo must have made the shell the wrong size. Then we're going to feed the ribbon cable very carefully through the hinge, clean up the small hinges and pop them into place. Remember to do that again whilst the shell is open. That way the hinge will close with a nice snap to it. Don't forget the little hinge piece. Then we can screw that down and then give every single button a really thorough clean with some isopropyl alcohol. Now, cleaning all the buttons is a really therapeutic part, and it's possibly one of my favorite parts because it's a really intricate, gentle process, and it's a great way to zone out from everyday stress. Then I'm going to go ahead and drop all of the small buttons back into place. They can only go into their respective places as they have small notches cut out to ensure that they're going into the right hole. Don't forget the small little light tube too. It's an easy one to forget. Now we're going to put the springs back onto the trigger buttons and pop them back into the shell. Then we can clean up the rather dusty, dirty motherboard with a toothbrush, very gently, and some isopropyl alcohol. Be very gentle there with a microphone. Drop in a bit of isopropyl alcohol into any switches as well so that you can give them a really nice contact. I'm going to do that with the L and R buttons too. Some people will dismantle those, but I don't really feel that's necessary in this instance. Now, I bought another screen on eBay, which is going to be slightly controversial because now I'm using different parts, but all the other one needed was just a replacement digitizer. It's just they were more expensive than just buying an official replacement screen which had been taken out of another DS, so I just decided to go with that. We can go ahead and reseat all of the ribbon cables. Again, be really, really careful whilst doing this. I'm using my metal tweezers this time, which I know is not a good idea, but I've done this quite a few times. Go ahead and very gently set them in, close down the latch, and reconnect the antenna wire. Then we're going to go ahead and put the 3 screws back in, and there's actually one underneath the cartridge slot which I forgot to do until a little bit later. Now, the back of this shell was in really bad condition. I could have scrubbed it up with a magic eraser, but again I found this piece on eBay for really cheap, which had come off of an official DS in much better condition. And I don't really want to paint that because the original ones aren't painted, it's just the black matte plastic. So it's going to make it look far better if we just use this one. But again, the other one is completely recoverable. Then we can go ahead and set all of the screws back in, put in the battery, and see if it still works. Result. A few things to do now just to finish it off. We're going to give the battery cover one last little scrub before putting that down and screwing it in. And then we need to reinstall the top panel of the Nintendo DS and screw that down. Again, be super careful when reinstalling this. One slight bit of too much pressure and that's going to ruin everything. Now the 4 screws can go back in, followed by the small rubber covers. And this is the finished article. I am super pleased with how this has turned out. Hopefully you can see by some of the small little dings here and the little crack that we saw there earlier that this is still the exact same Nintendo DS that I have completely refurbished. Overall, I think it's come out looking pretty much brand new. Obviously, when you look up close, there's a few small specks of dust underneath the paint, but without super professional working environments, it's really hard to get a professional finish. But yeah, I think overall it looks really cool. Managed to find a stylus I had kicking about to go in there as well. When we open it up, you can see that I have loaded in a game and everything works perfectly. Obviously, there's much more modern devices to play on than the Nintendo DS, but if you're looking for that little kick of nostalgia, there's something very special about just playing a Nintendo DS. The graphics were never meant to be the best, but the games were just meant to be super fun, and I think they achieved that result very well. I think the original DS design is actually quite underrated. I know the DS Lite was miles ahead in terms of how modern it looks, but this really is a device of the time. I think it came out in 2004, and yeah, I think it's quite special. So there we go, Game Boy cartridges running absolutely perfectly. I really hope you've all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing. I know it's a very different one to the ones that I normally do, so hopefully you enjoy it. I know some people just want to see a more in-depth, calm, no music, thorough video, and hopefully that's going to be helpful to some of those people who are looking for that. Follow along. Please have a go at doing this yourself. I'm not an expert, and I do believe that everybody is capable of achieving a result similar to this one. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye.